It's been a tough few years for Russo Brothers heads. I don't even know if that's a term or whatnot, or if fans of the Russo Brothers in that capacity even exist, but it's been a rough few years for the Russo Brothers in general. Maybe you thought Cherry would be an interesting way to recontextualize their working relationship with Tom Holland, tapping into a story that is really about something deeply personal to them, coming from Ohio and knowing people who fell victim to the opioid epidemic. But nope, that didn't happen. Hey, but you know what? Maybe you thought reuniting with Captain America himself and the endlessly charming Ryan Gosling for a globe-trotting action comedy would be shooting fish in a barrel. Somehow, wrong again. There's a common expression that goes like this: fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, well, you must be the Russo Brothers.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
At this point, you'd have to be a fucking idiot or just morbidly curious to watch their big, ugly Netflix movie starring Millie Bobby Brown. But, you wouldn't be the only idiot, because I watched it. I really did. And if you turn the clock back a bit, you can understand why the Russo Brothers were once a promising duo. A duo that Kevin Feige and the rest of Marvel Studios saw potential in and wanted to bring into the fold. I'm not in the business of bashing filmmakers. Making a movie is a miracle. It's so hard, and I don't even think that I have the capacity to do so. I mean, I might be foolish enough one day to think that I have ambitions of making a movie, but I have no delusions of what my talents are. And so the fact that the Russo Brothers have managed to have the career that they have is, kudos to them. It's great. They're living the dream that we all wish that they could. They're making films that they want to make. They're making arts that they want to make, for better or worse. Every person who makes a movie, every filmmaker, director, writer, actor, they put themselves out there, and ultimately what happens. And it's something that very few people can do and can do successfully. Being a truly great filmmaker means having to risk something, having to be vulnerable and honest and open with who you are and share a perspective with the world. And I think that's why, for as much as I respect the career the Russo Brothers have had, I struggle with some of their philosophies as of late when it comes to filmmaking. And the more I dug into them as filmmakers, and the more that I've watched their films post-Avengers Endgame, the more that their filmmaking mentality frustrates me. And so in making this video, I don't want it to come down as me just like bashing the shit out of the Russo Brothers. No, I mean, again, they're doing things that I could only ever dream of. But hopefully by making this video, I'll be able to offer a bit of insight into why their filmmaking process is a bit frustrating, and why I think they've largely failed to deliver a success of really any kind post-Avengers Endgame. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's wind the clock back to 1997. A movie called Pieces premiered at the Slam Dance Film Festival. No, not the Sundance Film Festival, the Slam Dance Film Festival. It was the work of a young directing duo who financed their feature on credit cards and student loans, something that anyone who's made a small independent film knows all too well. It had a punk ethos and a unique voice that attracted Steven Soderbergh, the king, especially at that time, of independent film, on the cusp of exploding with his feature Out of Sight. Soderbergh has great taste and knows talent when he sees it. While everyone else walked out of the film halfway through,
we had a lot of walkouts at Slam Dance, and everyone in the film business rejected us and rejected that film.
Soderbergh was one of the only audience members to sit through the entire thing. And not only did he sit through the entire thing, he enjoyed it. He loved it. And who did he see potential in? Joe and Anthony Russo.
I don't remember people walking out, but I wouldn't have noticed because I was watching the movie.
This is actually pretty ironic when we talk about Soderbergh a little bit later on. Cut to 6 years later, and these guys are directing episodes of Arrested Development, then Community, shaping the voice of iconic ensemble comedies and putting their own stamp on unique, albeit commercial, filmmaking on these beloved shows. And credit where credit is due. Their work was great here. They directed the iconic Paintball episodes of Community, riffing brilliantly on the Western genre and bringing unexpectedly kinetic and exciting action to a network comedy. This is no small feat. I mean, these guys knew how to plug into an existing machine and find new ways to turn the gears to improved results. This made them a logical choice to slot into the MCU, which was cooking before their arrival in 2014, but exploded in quality with the addition of the Russos. Captain America: The Winter Soldier was an effective genre riff with mortal stakes and a real sense of heft that would carry the franchise through to Endgame, an inarguably successful conclusion and truly Herculean feat. However, as soon as they left Marvel, they were lost at sea. Their egos had inflated to an untenable size after bagging one of the highest box office grosses in history with their final Avengers film. And it would seem that the Russos had the wrong takeaway from that success. To the world, this was a great Avengers film, the culmination of the MCU up until that point. To the Russo brothers, well, they saw it as validation of their every creative instinct. Now, the Russos' first flops were not their post-MCU work. Despite grabbing the attention of Soderbergh with pieces at Slamdance, their original follow-ups, Welcome to Collinwood and Yumi and Dupree, are largely forgettable fare. In fact, I'd venture to guess that most of you, despite your love for the Avengers, have not even seen these films. And to be honest, you're not really missing much. There's no denying the success that the Russos have had in the MCU and what they were able to accomplish with The Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. Like, if you look at it on a macro level, it's really damn impressive, specifically with a film like The Winter Soldier. However, I would argue that a lot of these projects would have been just as good, or maybe slightly different, without the Russos. I don't think the Russos are necessarily integral to the success of those projects. I just think that they happen to be the right guys at the right time. Let's take what I would consider to be their best film in the MCU to date, and that is The Winter Soldier. I know a lot of people want to credit them for shaking up the formula and doing something different and making Captain America cool and gritty and, all the spy shit, whatever. I would argue that a good chunk of the success of The Winter Soldier was because the Russos were merely taking the baton that was handed to them by Joss Whedon and actually Joe Johnston before him with the Avengers and the first Avenger and taking it in the next logical direction. Don't get me wrong, The Winter Soldier is great. It is my second favorite film in the MCU for a reason. It pushed the action of the universe in brilliant ways, but the logical thing to do with Captain America, with the man out of time, is to have his existence clash with modernity. That is why The Winter Soldier works. Not necessarily because it's this 70s inspired political thriller. It is that core idea. And I think you get any competent filmmaker in there, and that's the direction they go in.
When we were meeting with Marvel, eventually through our series of meetings, we got to the point where they were willing to show us a script.
I don't think we saw the script till the third
they
meeting.
were just calling
We
it
had two
Captain
meetings.
America.
We read the script and we're like, look at each other and we're like, this is a movie.
This is already a movie. Yeah, this is a movie. I get you.
The Winter Soldier doesn't work because of anything that the Russos established, at least from a character perspective. And even when we talk about the action, I mean, they kind of had the John Wick guys helping them out on that, so you can't even really credit them with pushing the boundary of action. You credit Chad Stahelski and David Leitch. But look, I don't want to dog on them for The Winter Soldier. It's a great film, and they did direct it with a lot of confidence, and there's no denying that they played a part in making it the success that it was. I'm just saying that a lot of the overall groundwork was laid for Captain America, and so the next logical direction you take that character naturally presents itself in an organic way. Looking at their career globally, you can see a clear pattern. When the Russos board a train already in motion, they're pretty effective conductors. But when the Russo brothers try to board a train from scratch, well, I'm not sure of the most effective metaphor, but those trains tend to be pieces of shit. There we go. We looped in pieces there. Fuck yeah. Blunder after blunder after blunder. And after all these flops, we finally arrive at The Electric State. After watching The Electric State, I'm starting to think that the only reason the Russos had success in the MCU was because they were brought in after the foundation was laid and the characters well defined so that they didn't have to work to make us care and or develop relationships. I'm not saying this is a conscious decision on their part, but I don't think they've ever had to do it themselves. And when they have, I mean, it's been a mess. Sure, their Marvel projects did push these characters, and I don't want to undermine the effectiveness of their work. Like, they did good work in the MCU, but so much of the pivotal heavy lifting was done so that they could come in to modulate arcs and add obstacles that challenged the status quo. When it was first announced that the Russos would be joining the MCU, it seemed curious, but exciting that two relatively unknown filmmakers were graduating to the big leagues. As I mentioned, they had been responsible for great episodes of Community and seemed like the kind of left field guys to energize Marvel in interesting ways. And they did. They made great Captain America movies, or movie. Don't hate me, I don't love Civil War that much. And they also brought the Avengers to a very satisfying conclusion. This tricked us into thinking that they were rock star filmmakers, but yeah, they're not. After several post-MCU at-bats that resulted in the brothers not only missing the ball, but somehow swinging the bat in a downward vertical arc at full force until it smashed their dick into Swedish pancakes, we're back to square one. The Russos are geared for episodic television, a format with strong oversight in the form of a showrunner, or in the case of the MCU, Kevin Feige. Left to their own devices, well, I mean, you've seen The Gray Man, folks. And you know what? That's not even the best example, right? Like, out of all of these bad movies, The Gray Man is probably the least bad out of all. I mean, it's really fucking bad. In the years since Endgame, a large part of why the Russos continued to fail is due to an inability to effectively establish a compelling foundation in their work. It's always rushed through, jumping too far ahead before effectively establishing characters, emotional connections, and motivations. Everything's always climax-driven. It's why their promising ideas are only half realized. They claim to prioritize efficiency in storytelling, but efficient storytelling doesn't mean checking off boxes to establish a protagonist on paper. In a normal video, you know, I might go deep on the electric state, but to be perfectly frank, I value your time. I value my time. There are far better ways for you to spend your day than hearing a dull recap of a bad movie. But to illustrate my point, I'll focus on one moment that represents the larger argument. In the electric state, Millie Bobby Brown's character, Michelle, goes on a journey that orbits her deceased brother Charlie, who, side note, is a horribly outdated savant trope. That's all he is. He's just like this whiz kid who has his consciousness put into a robot and he's held captive by a corporate guy. It's like, oh yeah, okay, so this autistic kid is the key to saving the world. He's not he's not a person. He's a miracle worker. Jesus. As the story develops, his character becomes increasingly complicated. All of the characters we find out their baggage and whatnot, but it's never in a way that is emotionally engaging. The Russo brothers think that by pressing the deceased brother button, they will automatically elicit an emotional reaction from the audience. But they only provide one scene of meaningful backstory, and guess what? It's at the very beginning. And that's all we're left with. That's what they use for the heavy lifting, and surprise, that's not how movies work. You can't just pay lip service to Michelle's traumatic loss as shorthand. We can't just have one scene and then expect to understand every facet of Michelle's trauma and the loss of her brother and parents and whatever. I mean, you have to make us feel it. They don't seem to understand that, which is representative of the larger failed project. With films like Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, they can get by with brief moments of character development because they're dealing with a fully formed ensemble of characters and have to balance so many of them. They can even include tossed off cameos of underdeveloped but beloved comic book characters because they're ultimately surrounded by a deeper and better developed ensemble. However, by solely adhering to archetypes and formulas in every film they make as shorthand to evoke emotion, they fail to do just that. They, and Marcus and McFeely, we're not going to let them off the hook because they're as guilty as the brothers here. They approach narrative with such a cold clinicism, like equations. Trope plus trope equals emotion, minimizing the artistic human element necessary to evoke the poignancy thereafter. It's also why their films offer almost zero perspective or insight on any of the topical ideas they should seemingly build from. How do you make a film like The Electric State, about humanity and technology that has nothing to say that we don't already know? How do you make Cherry, a film about the opioid epidemic in the Midwest, and merely gesture at a complicated systemic issue? Did you know that their dad was a prominent Democratic judge in Ohio? Because I sure didn't until I started doing a bit of research. Yet their political thrillers lack any sense of political engagement. It's wild. Their debut film, Pieces, was apparently about 3 kids who have this punk rock mentality towards life who find their way into crime, and it's something they related to? I mean, I'm sure they're not admitting to actually having been involved in crime, but, you know, perhaps being surrounded by it, growing up in it, and that's interesting. I mean, the way the Russos talk about growing up in Cleveland and it being a wreck in the 70s and being this place that people became trapped in. It's a blue-collar working town and it caused them to have a very fatalistic outlook on life and joke about it.
This was a hard luck town. This was a place that, you know, people didn't escape from.
Part of the way the Clevelanders dealt with that kind of high drama was to develop a sense of humor about it, a self-awareness of it.
And our sense of humor was very fatalistic. We had a very existential point of view on life.
Where the fuck is this in your work? You'd never know. If you watched a Russo Brothers film, you'd have no idea. Why do I have to go all the way back to 1997 and watch a film that doesn't actually even have a release for me to see this from you? Why do I have to watch little snippets on your social media that you post every now and then for me to see that, oh, you know, these guys actually gave a damn about the art of filmmaking and actually wanted to infuse their voice and perspective into the things that they made? This is especially crazy since they adapted a book, Cherry, that was explicitly about this. Like, not even informed by these ideas, actually literally about it. Crazier still that there isn't an ounce of their culture in their films either. I mean, I'm not saying it's a requirement, but they're both clearly very Italian and have talked about growing up in a very big traditional Italian household, being inspired by filmmakers like Scorsese, and yet there's none of that on the screen. This should have been their film to really tell the world who they are. I mean, it was clearly their attempt to do so, but I guess they just don't have the talent or perspective to do so. Want to know why their films feel AI generated? This is why. I could go on, but this shallow assembly line approach to filmmaking is frankly pathetic. This is why I have no faith in their Secret Wars adaptations. I mean, aside from the obvious that it just feels like Marvel is rushing to Secret Wars because they got nothing else, the MCU post-Endgame has no clearly defined status quo. So to go and blow it up will amount to something that lacks pathos. The Russos cannot be the guys to kick this thing off. They just can't do it. They're only able to function when there is a well-laid foundation, and the current state of the MCU is in shambles. One final thought before I put this whole thing to bed. Remember Steven Soderbergh? Well, we're getting back to him right now. Let's contrast how the Russos view efficiency in storytelling to how Soderbergh views efficiency in storytelling. Soderbergh's latest film, Black Bag, it's fucking great. I love it. It's a brilliant espionage thriller that you should all be watching instead of quite literally anything else the Russo brothers have put out, but you should just go watch it. It's a really, really good film. It's 90 minutes of all the essential components needed to craft a compelling drama without sacrificing character. He simplifies the concepts, reins in the scale, orients the narrative around character, and then conveys that character and information through action by showing instead of telling, and having your characters talk with the awareness and emotional intelligence to grasp that. The audience is now an active participant in the narrative, and the director, Soderbergh, and writer David Koepp as well, because we're not going to leave him out of this, he's part of the reason that movie works as well as it does, is able to get to the point a lot quicker without sacrificing the emotional integrity of the film. And the key is this: Soderbergh starts with character, not with plot. If your characters are well drawn, the narrative emerges organically. That's efficient storytelling. The Agbo boys, on the other hand, view efficient storytelling as stripping a narrative down to a plot checklist. The problem is that a plot is only as compelling as the characters breathing within it, and the Russos have no idea how to craft those. In Success, they've been handed a slew of beloved toys to play with and could plug those into their plot machine. The audience came to the films with goodwill and a shorthand for who all the players are. The problem for the Russos arises when a plot-driven film is horribly dull and uninteresting and doesn't comprehend that it's not a character-driven story. Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, for example, is very plot-driven, but it plays with the form, creating a tense experience by engaging the audience on a sensory level. By doing so, the characters become vessels for the audience in the story. It has never occurred to the Russo brothers to do that. Never. They've always been given a Bible with all essential story elements, and they've then been given a long leash to play around. It's a skill, for sure, I don't want to diminish that, but not one that qualifies you to build story from the ground up. They prioritize getting from point A to point B, but the problem is that the broad, crowd-pleasing films they draw inspiration from are home to memorable characters. Spielberg, the not-so-subtle inspiration behind The Electric State, dominated the 80s and 90s, not because he simply had the best story ideas or he knew how to execute them and was great at the craft of filmmaking, but because he knew how to invest audiences in his characters. Because the Russos are not making conscious formal experiences like Dunkirk, but traditional four-quadrant studio movies, they desperately need characters. The Russos don't want to sacrifice real estate or runtime and wouldn't dare scale down a project that needs to be scaled down. Just look at that $300 million budget for the fucking Electric State. So you have these long, tedious stretches of wasted space, superficial chit-chat, expository dialogue, redundant, predictable information, and underwhelming, emotionless character beats. E.T. isn't E.T. because of flying bikes, aliens, and John Williams. It's E.T. because of how much time we spend with Elliot and E.T., forming a connection, a friendship, and becoming an intimate part of that bond. So when we get to the climax and E.T. has to go home, it's as devastating for us as it is for Elliot. I don't know if it's laziness, condescension, or just sheer shallowness, but the current Russo streak is the most cynical form of storytelling imaginable. Show don't tell is the oldest and most important lesson in the book, but they don't seem to have read it. Maybe they can't read. I don't know. When the Russo brothers released Cherry on Apple TV, they included the below director's statement, which I find to be rather illuminating in hindsight. As filmmakers, we have always been compelled to disrupt form and defy expectations. We're devious by nature. We poke fun at subjects, genres, and ideas as much as we examine or pay homage to them. It's intrinsic to our fatalist sense of humor and to our determined commitment to life as a prosaic exercise. It's what has allowed us to craft a singular career path, devoid of external influence. Choosing to follow up the sentimentally elegant 400 Blows with the absurdist Shoot the Piano Player, Francois Truffaut said, "I took my pleasure as my only rule of conduct." As young filmmakers, that quote became our engine. Cherry is yet another example. These are the films that inspired us to push the limits of how we constructed its darkly comic tale. I would like to challenge this idea that they've crafted a singular path devoid of external influence, when their greatest successes have been neatly teed up by pre-existing work. I mean, a big part of the marketing campaign for Captain America: The Winter Soldier is that they were hearkening back to the 70s political thriller, right? They were trying to do 3 Days at the Condor, but make it Marvel, make it Captain America. They are so deeply influenced by previous work. Just look at the Electric State. I mean, my God, it's just like a goldmine of Amblin influences. One could say it's even a worse version of one of Spielberg's most recent films, Ready Player One, which is saying something. I just don't get these guys. They sit here and they talk about being enamored with French New Wave because of a matching sense of fatalism and loving the blending of the absurd and earnest. I'm flabbergasted because it just reeks of filmmakers that don't even understand the kind of movies they make, because that's not what they make. It honestly makes me think that they might be the kinds of people who are better at talking about movies than actually making them. And that's probably why they might be better suited as producers. I mean, they've produced some fairly decent stuff at Agbo, but as directors, I mean, that's a whole other story. Before poking fun at subjects, maybe, just maybe, they should first learn to craft them. But the Truffaut comparison, just fuck, man, that blows my goddamn mind. Anyway, the Electric State fucking sucks. It wants to be the creator so bad, it even cribs the opening of that film to embarrassing effect, but winds up being nothing more than a soulless Ready Player One knockoff with one-dimensional characters and offensively oversimplifying and sanitizing Simon Stålenhag's beloved graphic novel. I so deeply wish these guys would just go away or actually give a damn about the stories they want to tell, because based on the work that they're churning out, I'm done. Anyway, Avengers Doomsday will be in theaters before we know it. I hope, for the sake of my love for their previous MCU work, that this return will find them playing to their strengths, but, you know, if I'm being honest, I fear this time Lost at Sea is bound to impact their creative process, and I can't imagine it's for the best.